JD Vance is the notorious candidate for a Senate seat in Ohio, and it turns out that a former buddy of his has leaked some text messages that he sent in regard to Donald Trump dating back to 2016. Now, JD Vance was very critical of Trump, that's not a secret, but it turns out that he even compared Donald Trump to Hitler. So Josh McLaurin is the lawmaker from Georgia who decided to share the screenshot. He says, the screenshot below is JD Vance's unfiltered explanation from 2016 of the breakdown in Republican politics that he now personally is trying to exploit. The America's Hitler bit is at the end. The public deserves to know the magnitude of this guy's bad faith. And then he shares the screenshot of the text message. I'm gonna read it in its entirety because I think all of it is fascinating and it shows you what JD Vance really thinks, but will clearly message something completely different for his political aspirations. He wrote, again, back in 2016, but I'm not surprised by Trump's rise, and I think the entire party has only itself to blame. We are, whether we like it or not, the party of lower income, lower education white people, and I have been saying for a long time that we need to offer those people something, and hell, maybe even expand our appeal to working class black people in the process. Woo, wow, imagine that. He continues to say, or a demagogue would, we are now at that point. Trump is the fruit of the party's collective neglect. I go back and forth between thinking Trump is a cynical person like a-hole, like Nixon, who wouldn't be that bad and might even prove useful, or that he's America's Hitler. How's that for discouraging?
Yeah, well, how's that for a sleazy liar? And I don't mean that text, that's where he's being honest. So I'm gonna get to that in a second. First of all, unendorsement from Trump coming in 3, 2, 1, okay? So we'll come back to that too. But that text message, well, that's the real JD Vance. He's talking to, at the time, a friend, now I suppose a former friend, right? And he's telling his real feelings. And he thinks Trump might be the next Hitler. He thinks, hey, maybe we could actually try to help black people too. He's honest about who his voters are. He's honest all throughout that text. Now, the current JD Vance is the sleaziest liar you'll ever see. He's kissing Donald Trump's ass on the left, the right, the middle. And oh my God, he's using every critical race theory nonsense talking point from the right wing to alienate blacks and to get white, by his own admission, uneducated whites to hate black people more. He's dividing us when we could be united on economic issues. Instead, he's dividing us on race. He's going with the worst hatred. He's helping to work with a guy he thinks might be Hitler. Does it get any worse than that? And the answer is maybe. The other guy in the race on the Republican side is Josh Mandel. And he is another guy who is nuclear level toxic, okay? It's a house of horrors on the Republican side. By the way, you do have an alternative in that race. Morgan Harper, who's an awesome progressive, is in that race. MorganHarper.org, we'll put the link down below. MorganHarper.org, make sure you're checking that out because she's running as well. When she actually did a debate against Josh Mandel a couple of times, she humiliated him. It was awesome to watch.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Morgan Harper. She came in studio for an interview when she ran the first time, and I found her to be incredibly impressive, obviously very progressive, and I really hope that she wins in that race. But I do wanna remind you all of how extreme JD Vance has gotten in terms of his rhetoric and his campaigning strategy. In fact, very recently we covered one of his latest campaign ads where he decided to mimic Donald Trump. And if you don't remember what that looked like, why don't we take a look?
Are you a racist? Do you hate Mexicans? The media calls us racist for wanting to build Trump's wall. They censor us, but it doesn't change the truth. Joe Biden's open border is killing Ohioans, with more illegal drugs and more Democrat voters pouring into this country. This issue is personal. I nearly lost my mother to the poison coming across our border. No child should grow up an orphan. I'm JD Vance, and I approve this message because whatever they call us, we will put America first.
So the video just starts off with him saying, do you hate Mexicans? I mean, disgusting. I mean, it was just a pretty terrible ad. Obviously, it's not trying to appeal to us, but he has taken on Donald Trump's style of campaigning, and he's exploiting what Donald Trump has created in the Republican Party.
So that's a great point about the ad, because in the ad, he says, are you racist? Do you hate Mexicans? That's the beginning of it. Now, when you look at the text, you realize that's what he thinks his base actually thinks. And then he says, of course, in the ad, now, of course you don't do that, right? You don't believe that, but you know that they're all dirty and they're gonna make the country worse.
Right.
So he's smart enough to know what the political dynamics in America are. And he's smart enough to know that the Republicans are choosing an avowedly racist strategy. And then he himself adopts that strategy and uses it in a campaign ad. It's just, look, when you sign up to be on Hitler's team, it just hard to get worse than that.
But Jake, he just wants that Senate seat so bad. I mean, doesn't that make it better?
Yeah, by the way, every Republican who's kissing Trump's ass just for a Senate seat, Dr. Oz, among many others, I mean, there is no end to the shame that you should live with for the rest of your life.
Look, I think this is why so many Americans have lost trust in our institutions, which is honestly a pretty dangerous climate to live in, right? They don't trust our politicians. How could you? When this kind of news comes out and it's abundantly clear that politicians don't really stand for anything, they just go with whatever political wave is gonna be beneficial for their political campaigns. And remember, JD Vance was critical of Trump before and then later apologized about it. For instance, he wrote a column back in February of 2016 in USA Today where he said that Trump's actual policy proposals, such as they are, range from immoral to absurd. In October of 2016, he described Trump as reprehensible in a post on Twitter. He also stated his intentions to vote for the independent presidential candidate, Evan McMullin. And later, when he realized that maybe that's not gonna help him with his campaign, he deleted those tweets and apologized. Trump surprisingly endorsed him anyway because he thinks that JD Vance is the best candidate to win, Republican candidate to win in that race. But let's just hold and see how he's gonna take the latest news where JD Vance had basically called him Hitler.
And by the way, guys, understand that this is not like, oh my God, we found the one politician who's a sleazeball. No, this is the norm. Everyone in mainstream media will pretend this is the exception. Oh my God, can you believe that JD Vance thinks something differently privately than what he says publicly on the campaign trail? The entire country is screaming, of course, yes, we can believe that. The only people who are surprised work in journalism, in mainstream media. I got news for you, 90% of the politicians think like he does. Every time there's a story about what Republicans think behind closed doors in private, it comes out as, oh, they can't stand Trump. They think Trump's a lunatic, a literal madman. They were thinking of using the 25th Amendment against him. They think he's one of the worst people they've ever met in their entire lives. And yet, do you hear the media telling you, oh yeah, they're all liars. All of these politicians are liars. They say one thing and they do another. Nope, oh, beloved establishment, prestigious, credible politicians. We are at your service, mainstream media says. No, that is not the exception. JD Vance, unfortunately, is the rule. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.